Welcome to the Art and Skills of Quality Interviews. The core content of this program is about the skills needed to create quality interviews. But please don't think of it only as interviews. The demonstration of skills you'll be seeing in this program go far beyond interview assignments. The same techniques demonstrated here are fundamentally the same ones used for just about every other type of video production. Interview assignments represent only a portion of Nino's work. With some variations, Nino uses the same techniques for his features and documentaries, advertising and commercial projects, corporate assignments, marketing programs for the hospitality industry, industrial training, and every other type of assignment that demands quality work. About Nino. Nino is an Emmy Award recipient who began his training in art, photography, cinematography, and photojournalism in the early 60s in his native northern Italy. After relocating to the United States, Nino continued his studies while serving in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam conflict. In 1970, upon his discharge from the Army, he started his freelance career that is still going strong after nearly half a century. Too many to list here, his worldwide list of clients include a who's who in the broadcasting and production industry. And now let's see what Nino did to achieve a successful career that started over half a century ago and is still going strong. The very first step in creating quality interviews is creating quality lighting. And the very first step in creating quality lighting is by using the right equipment. In this chapter, we'll take a close look at the types of lights Nino prefers to use for his interview assignments. As you will see, Nino uses a variety of lights. Most of the time, there are specific reasons for using different lights. But many times, it's just about the creative mood Nino is in. This is the beauty of this profession, that you're allowed to be as creative as you want to be. All of these lights we'll be seeing here are commercially available, but we can't expect the manufacturers to do the creative work for us. We have to do that ourselves. Often, we have to be one step ahead of the manufacturers in order to achieve the quality that sets us apart from our competition. Often, manufacturers get ideas from us. We are those on the front line. We know better than anyone else what we need in order to do the best job possible. The most popular light today is the 1 foot by 1 foot LED panel. This is a great and versatile light, probably the biggest innovation in lighting in the last half-century. But when it comes to interviews, this light in itself falls short of the type of quality that Nino looks for in a light. The 1 foot by 1 foot design of these new generation of lights needs some help in order to achieve the quality we're looking for. However, this shortcoming can easily be corrected by placing a light modifier between the light and the subject. For those who don't know or remember what a light modifier is, it's something placed between the light and the subject or object to be photographed. A modifier will change and improve the output of a light. When we place a modifier in front of a light, the modifier becomes the actual light source. Let's see the difference with and without a diffuser or modifier. The light generated from a raw light source comes out in a straight line, and of course when it hits the subject will create a distinctive, harsh shadow. For the majority of interviews, this is not acceptable, especially when dealing with older people. A diffuser placed in front of the light will cause the light to scatter in every direction. Being much larger than the subject also means that the light source will hit the subject from many directions, creating what's referred to as the wraparound, meaning that the light will gradually fall off in the shadow areas, thus creating gradual and soft shadows. Not even a question of which one is better for quality interviews. A large, soft, diffused key light looks equally great on both young and older persons. If in a hurry and all we need is a good shot of the subject, we could actually get away by using a single large diffused light. But of course, this is not what creating quality interviews is all about. Of course, these days, where every minute counts, using these types of setups might not be very practical. It requires 2 additional light stands, the frame, the diffuser, and clamps to mount the frame to the stand, not to mention the extra time needed to assemble the unit. Even on the better budgeted assignments, producers are always looking to get things done faster without sacrificing quality. And this is why Nino created his own version of a large diffuser that can be assembled in minutes. By using standard grips in addition to a clamp that Nino designed and built himself, he can mount readily available collapsible diffusers of any size directly on the key light stand. This will eliminate the need of bringing 2 additional stands. This system is fully adjustable, and with the exception of the custom-made large clamp, it uses readily available grips and standard collapsible diffusers. If light spill is an issue, we can just wrap a lightweight black cloth around the diffuser. Assembling the entire light takes only minutes. Because of its versatility and quality of light, producers and directors have fallen in love with this contraption, not just for interviews, but for all sorts of assignments. The only drawback in using a large light diffusing light source is that the light will scatter all over the room. In most cases, this can actually help. In addition to lighting the subject, the spilling light will also provide a secondary illumination around the room, thus minimizing or even eliminating the need of using additional lights. As we can see in this image of a TV commercial, only 2 large square light panels with large diffusers were used to illuminate the subject, as well as providing overall lighting for the entire set. Speeding up the production without sacrificing quality is what producers are looking for these days. If the spilling light would create a problem, then we can use the many available black screen and flags to contain the light and direct it only where we need it. The next light that Nino uses when the large diffuser is not practical is one of the many soft boxes available for the 1x1 LED panels. The unfortunate downside of these soft boxes is that they are not large enough to provide the so important wraparound that Nino always looks for. Nino uses these small soft boxes only where space is an issue, and using larger diffusers would be impractical or impossible. Another light that Nino uses frequently and has been using long before LED lights were introduced to our profession is the Kinoflow fluorescent line of lights. Although still widely used and still available for purchase, fluorescent lights are slowly being replaced by LED technology. Available in many sizes, the 4-foot by 4 tubes unit is ideal as a key light. It provides diffusion as well as soft wraparound. All the Kinoflow fluorescents have available honeycomb grids that cut down on spills and allows for more accurate light direction. With most interviews, when using the 4-foot light as a key, Nino uses the smaller Kinoflow barfly as a fill light. We should always try to use the same type of light and possibly from the same manufacturer as a key fill light combination in order to eliminate possible color differences. Another light that has been Nino's favorite for the last 3 decades is the Chimera softbox. This light has been in mothballs for the last few years, as there was no way to fit them on the 1x1 LED panels. The best and easiest way to use Chimera softboxes with LED technology is by purchasing good LED Fresnel's lights. Chimera has available speed ring mounts for every popular Fresnel LED light. By the way, you might notice, especially those who have been in the profession for many years, that these are Ari Fresnel's tungsten lights. Although still in use, for all practical purposes, tungsten lights are a thing of the past. These Ari 1K Fresnels were converted to LED lights. Chimera softboxes are especially practical when soft light is required, but spills could be a problem. Because they're self-contained, there's no light bouncing back from the reflector. Because all the light is directed forward and not spilled sideways, the actual output when using a Chimera softbox will be much greater when compared to a standalone light modifier, meaning of course that we could use a smaller and less expensive LED light. Chimera also has available fabric grids and soft barn doors as additional accessories to give the cameraman even more control on the light direction. We said earlier that there was no way to adapt larger Chimera softboxes to the very popular 1 foot by 1 foot LED panel. But in order to maintain his reputation as a stubborn Italian, Nino did not buy that. He gained his reputation as a problem solver because he doesn't accept the word no. In his mind, there's always a way to do it. In order to make use of the many Chimera softboxes available on the market and still use the 1x1 LED panels, Nino created this contraption. With the exception of the short 1-inch pipe, this entire rig is made completely out of readily available grips, no custom parts needed. The LED panel actually is mounted inside the softbox instead of on the outside as it's been done for decades. The result is a very large, soft light with great output and minimum spills. Next, we'll move to the fill light. The sole purpose of the fill light is to control the ratio of the shadow created by the key light. This is referred to as light ratio. We can make the shot look as flat or as dramatic as we want to, simply by adjusting the intensity of the fill light. Depending on the location and how much room we have to work with, we might use the same large diffuser as the key light and as a fill, but often we end up with a 1x1 light panel with a smaller softbox as a fill. The fill doesn't need to be as large as the key light. Fabric grids are also available for these small softboxes, and they come in handy when there's the need of controlling the direction of the light. The last two lights for the subject are the hair and side or kick light. These two lights are not as critical as the key and fill lights, but Nino still prefers to use larger lights for the same reason as the key light, because they provide softer wraparound lighting. Next on Nino's light arsenal are the Fresnel lights. Nino has many of these, from the smaller ones to the very big ones. As far as interviews go, Nino uses Fresnel lights mostly for the background. The last of the lights Nino uses for interviews is the ETC Source 4. If on a budget, it could easily be replaced with a Cuculuris, or even punching holes in a black foil and putting it on a Fresnel light. But Nino prefers the control and the variety of gobos patterns available for the Source 4. Just keep the patterns in the background very subdued. Don't let them overpower the image, as we see too often on television. Now that we know the lights that Nino uses for interviews, let's move on to the most important segment of this entire program: the correct uses and placement of all these lights. For centuries, the lighting of people has been one of the artist's most valuable skills. From the immortal Renaissance artists to master photographers like Yusuf Karsh, lighting is the main element that turns images into masterpieces. The same lighting techniques that were created centuries ago by immortal artists are still the foundation of quality lighting for modern artists, photographers, and cinematographers. These are the techniques we use every day, although many in our profession have no idea where these lighting techniques came from. We'll discover later in this segment where, when, how, and most importantly why the lighting techniques that most of us use every day were created and by whom. Before anyone discards the importance of good lighting skills, keep in mind that those who work hard to gain those skills earn substantially more than those who don't. This is a proven fact. One of Nino's methods for expanding and refining his lighting skill is by simply watching classic movies. Not the movie itself, but the images. When Nino finds a well-lit scene, freezes the frame, and spends hours studying how it was lit. The next step is trying to adapt the light he saw on a motion picture to his daily work. Let's see how this lighting technique works. This is a scene lit with a single light source placed at the camera's position. Think of it as the onboard light on a camera or a key light placed too close to the camera lens. The light is flat. The object appears like a circle. It has no spherical roundness or depth. The moment we bring the light around, like we would on a key light, we start creating modeling. Now the plane circle suddenly starts showing its roundness. Of course, everything else is dark, and we are still showing only a single plane in the image. Let's place one single light on the background, but instead of illuminating the entire background, we'll concentrate the light only behind the dark areas of the object. Now, suddenly we have dimensional depth, as the object and the background are separated by light and dark areas. This is the very basic principle of the chiaroscuro technique. Let's take it one step further. Let's place more objects in the image using the same lighting technique. Now, the light and dark technique is clearly showing the dimensional depth. As we can see, the light placement is distinctively separating each plane in the image, as well as showing the roundness of each object. Now, let's use some lighting and other techniques to concentrate the viewer's attention on one portion of the image. We can accomplish this by lowering the light intensity on everything that is not of primary importance. This will make the main point of interest stand out from the rest. We can also accomplish the same result by using selective focusing, so only what's important will be in sharp focus. Just look at the comparison. The very same image, but with and without the chiaroscuro lighting technique. Can you imagine what this technique can do to our works? Now, let's see how we can apply the chiaroscuro principles to our daily work. The first rule of quality lighting is to throw away every lighting diagram. You will not learn anything by looking at a bunch of X's on a piece of paper showing where you should place the light stand. The only way to learn about quality lighting is by seeing what the light does on the subject and the shadow it casts. Let's start with the fundamentals of creating quality interviews. The first thing we do, even before we start loading in equipment, is to ask the producer if there are any specific requirements for this interview. Often, the interview is part of a feature or documentary and must match other interviews done elsewhere. This particular video was done across the country, Yet from the look, it could very well have been done at the same location by the same crew. Sometimes it's more time-consuming to match a set done by someone else than starting one from scratch. The first and most important question to ask is if there's a subject placement requirement. Is the subject on the right looking left, or vice versa, left looking right? This will dictate the light's placement. If the subject is on camera left, looking right, then the proper order would be the reporter just right of the camera, key light on the right of the reporter, and fill light just left of the camera. For subject on the right of the frame looking left, then reverse everything like looking into a mirror. We don't want to go into the basic rules of composition as everyone should already know them. But remember the rule of third when composing interviews. Place the subject on the 1/3 side of the image looking into the other 2/3. This should be the fundamental rule of composition. There are, however, times when breaking the rules and making our own is what would enhance the image or the story. In this case, as we can plainly see, the subject is on the wrong side of the image. The reason we did this for this particular story was that the subject was describing the decorating of her house. By using this particular framing, we broke the composition rules and placed the priority on the actual interior of this home. Also, you are always told to use a low-back, non-swiveling chair for interviews, and this should be the main rule. However, there are times when we have to do it differently in order for the interview to blend with the story. Remember that the most important part of the images are the eyes and mouth of the person being interviewed. This is what we instinctively look at when someone is talking to us. There's something called visual psychology, and one of the rules is that our eyes are always attracted to the lightest part of an image. This is why the lightest part of our image should be the front of the face. Understandably, in television, because of editorial requirements, this is not always possible, but at least it should be one of our priorities when creating quality interviews. There also seems to be some confusion about the correct camera height. Unless we're trying to create a special effect, the lens should be at eye level of the subject, then tilted down to frame and compose the image. The unwritten rule is that if you see the inside of the nostrils, you're too low. If you don't see the nostrils at all, you're too high. Let's start with the 4 fundamental positions of the lights we use for interviews. The 4 lights are the key light, the fill light, the hair light, the side light. The side light is frequently referred to as edge or kick or grease light. For some strange reason over the years, some very colorful names have been given to this light. For simplification, we'll refer to this light as the side light. The key light. There are 3 fundamental key light placements we use for interviews: the 45 degrees or Rembrandt light, the front or butterfly light, and the 90 degrees or split light. Let's start with the 45 degrees or Rembrandt light as the artist's wide use of this technique. The light is placed at approximately 45 degrees on the far side of the camera from the direction that the subject is looking to, not 45 degrees in reference to the camera position. Your indicator, if the light is placed correctly, is a small triangle of light that will appear under the eye on the shadow side of the face opposite of the key light. The next popular key light position is what's called the butterfly light, or better, front light. The light is placed directly in front of the direction of where the subject is looking to. If placed correctly, although keep in mind that this is television and not a still portrait, and the subject is constantly moving, the shadow of the nose should be directly below and about halfway between the nose and upper lip. The shape formed by the shadow will look like wings, and this is why this is called butterfly light. The last of the popular key light positions is the split light or 90 degrees light. Here, the light is placed on the far side of the subject, and basically it should illuminate only half of the face. Because this light position can be lowered to the subject head level with minimal or no effect on the shadow side of the face, it is very beneficial when interviewing athletes who insist on wearing hats, mainly because of sponsoring commitments. Placing the light in any other position will cast a shadow from the hat visor into the eyes. Next is the fill light. Like the name says, the fill light is there to fill the shadow created by the key light. The type of light used as a fill is not as critical as the key light, but it should also be a soft light. Most importantly is that both the key and the fill lights should be of the same type and from the same manufacturer in order to avoid possible color variations on the subject's face. Unless there are reasons for the fill light to be moved, such as reflections on the subject's glasses, the correct position of the fill light should be as close to the axis to the camera lens as possible and on the opposite side of the key light. If we move the fill light too far off the lens axis, we basically end up with a secondary key light that might create unwanted shadows from the opposite direction of the key light. The fill light's main purpose is to control the shadow created by the key light, better known as light ratio. We can make it as dark and dramatical or as flat as we need by just adjusting the dimmer on the fill light. Many people prefer using a reflector on the shadow side of the key light as a fill source. Nino does not recommend this, and you can see why. In order to work, the reflector must be placed on the opposite side of the key light, meaning that even a large reflector will illuminate only the side and not the front of the face. As you can see, we have what's called dead eyes, as there is no light being reflected in the eyes, and this makes a major difference in the quality of any interview. Any kind of age line will stand out, and this would be particularly unacceptable with older people. The reflector is also casting a shadow of the hair on the dark side of the face, and you can hardly see the jewelry that the subject is wearing. For quality interviews, using a reflector for fill is not the correct way to do it. The last two subjects' lights are the hair and side light. Nino also uses larger lights as hair and side lights for the same reason that he prefers to use larger and softer key lights, because they give a softer wraparound on the subject. There are new lights being introduced almost daily, so by the time you see this video, who knows what Nino will use as his favorite lights. The main purpose of these two lights is to give added separation of the subject from the background while creating dimensional depth. This is particularly important when the subject has dark hair or dark clothes against a dark background. It also creates an additional plane of light and dark sequence. If done correctly, it gives the image additional dimensional depth. Of course, if you have a subject with little or no hair, then you don't need a hair light. Actually, you don't want a hair light, as all it does is create an unflattering shine on the subject's head. But we still need the light on the shoulders to maintain separation. The best way to eliminate the reflection is to attach a piece of black foil to the barn doors of the hair light, then shape the foil to direct the light away from the head and only into the shoulders. And just like that, the shine is gone. The hair light must be mounted on a boom to do the job it was intended to do. Using a tall stand on the side of the subject is not a true hair light. Many people do this, but here we're talking about quality interviews. If you don't have yet a one-piece convertible light stand boom combination, get one. They work great for most assignments, cost less than a separate stand and boom, and is one less thing that you have to bring on location with you. The hair light should be placed about 3 feet above and 3 or 4 feet behind the subject. Tilt it down to make sure the light doesn't flare into the camera lens. The last of the subject's lights is the side light. The side light should be placed on the opposite side of the key light and about 5 feet behind the subject. It should be as close behind the subject as possible without affecting the image or flaring into the lens. This should create only an edge of light. This is what we should be looking for. Many times we end up lighting the back side of the head because this is what the producer or director likes. Good barn doors on the light are highly recommended. And this is progressively what all 4 lights look like on the subject. This completes the light placement segment of this video. On the next segment, we'll talk about creating backgrounds, as well as how to set up multiple camera interviews. In this segment, we'll see a variety of challenging situations in creating those backgrounds that producers and directors love to see. We'll see how Nino handles those and the special props and equipment he's been using to tackle every situation he faces, no matter how challenging it might be. How important really is the background? The usual time that Nino asks and gets from producers to set up a single camera interview is 2 hours. More if it's a multiple camera interview. It only takes him 30 minutes or less to light the subject. The rest of the time is spent on the background. Often the most effective interviews are those where there's no background at all. But editorially, we need good backgrounds for our interviews. How we handle the background will make the difference if the producer hires us back for the next assignment or hires somebody else. That's how important it is to create a good background. There are all kinds of backgrounds. The black limbo background, the plain white background, beautiful home backgrounds, abstract backgrounds, the unrecognizable backgrounds, backgrounds that tell a story, the dramatic background, and there's the nightmare background when there's absolutely nothing there to work with and the producers expect us to work miracles. That's why we get the big bucks. Regardless of how hard we work to light the subject, it will be all wasted if we don't create a good background to go along with our interview. Whenever possible, we ask the producer to send us JPEGs of the area assigned to do the interview. Also, we ask to make sure that the selected area is very, very quiet. For good interviews, audio is more important than video. The first thing we do when we get to a location is to look for optimum space and suitable backgrounds. Many times we have to think a little outside the box, or better, outside the room. On many of our interviews, we set the camera in the next room and shoot through door openings in order to gain maximum camera depth. Sometimes we even have to shoot out of a locker room shower in order to get the most distance. In most situations, the best distance in any room is corner to corner or at an angle. We then mentally divide the space in thirds: 1/3 between camera and subject, and 2/3 between subject and background. The first thing we do, we have to decide how much background we need to show. The camera goes up first, and then we frame up the subject based on editorial directions. If the subject to be interviewed is not yet available, we'll use one of our crew. Our camera placement and lens selection will be determined on how much background we want to see and how detailed or out of focus we want the background to be. This could be an editorial decision. Something in the background might be part of the story and must be recognizable. Or the producer might just leave it up to us in deciding what will look the best. Whenever possible, Nino always prefers to keep the subject at a good distance from the background and reposition the camera in order to get more or less of the background. Decreasing the subject to background distance might interfere with our lighting setup. If we want to see more background, simply move the camera a little closer to the subject and either widen the zoom or use a shorter focal length lens. Do the opposite, of course, if we don't need to see as much background. Move the camera back and use a longer zoom setting or a longer focal length lens. Notice that the framing of the subject remains the same. For this interview, we are in someone's home, and this requires a different approach, as if we were in an office or a sports facility. They are allowing us to enter their homes, and we have to treat everything as if it was our home. Usually, it's easy to find a good background in a residence. The biggest problem is getting enough distance to create good depth. Getting JPEGs from this location was very useful. The piano would make a great background, as it was also part of the story. The only problem was the hallway next to the piano. In Nino's opinion, it doesn't look good in a background. To remedy this, Nino brought a room divider that matched the set, and the problem was quickly resolved. After seeing the JPEGs, we knew that camera distance wouldn't be an issue, as there was a good opening from the adjacent room to give us plenty of depth. Next, we went to work on the background. We removed all the pictures that were cluttering the image. Keep in mind that before we moved anything, we asked for permission from the homeowner and took a picture with our smartphone to make sure we put everything back in its proper place. Nino's rule is, you'll never know we were here. We borrowed another framed picture from the house and used a safety cable to lower the picture for a better composition. Next, we placed a small flower arrangement on the side of the piano to frame in the image, but it was too dark and too small for a Fresnel light. So Nino clamped a small zoomable flashlight to the background boom stand and focused the beam on the flowers only. He always carries a few of these just in case. We used 3 Fresnel lights in addition to the flashlight. All Fresnels had CTO gel to warm up the wood in the piano and give color separation from the subject. One Fresnel was to create a spot for behind the head of the subject, another to give the piano an overall light, and the third one mounted on a boom. The reason Nino uses boom-mounted lights on the backgrounds is so the light can come from above and behind. This gives the objects roundness and depth. All the subject lights were Kinoflow fluorescent. Nino decided on the Kinoflow because they are easier to contain spills. A lot of black cloth, black screens, and flags were used to eliminate any light bouncing back into the set. Now on to the next setup. This is one situation where Nino had absolutely nothing to work with. That's a cameraman's nightmare. Back in the 90s, Nino was part of a group of cameraman directors of photography selected to create interviews for the Sports Century features for ESPN Classics. They had to follow specific guidelines on how the interviews had to look, and the backgrounds were a major part of these assignments. It had to look great regardless of where the interviews were being held. Often the interviews took place in garages, bathrooms, showers, hallways, anywhere there was a space available. They could never rely on what was already there. They had to bring everything that was needed to create a background. 20 years later, and Nino still can't rely on what's there. In order to meet producers' and clients' expectations, those props used for the old ESPN Classic, plus many new ones, are still part of Nino's interview package. You probably have seen many of these on television for years, never imagining it was all fake. The most useful of these props has been the collapsible backdrops. These are easy to use. They are undetectable as a fake and relatively inexpensive. These are always in Nino's van, and they saved the day countless times. When you look at these interviews, they look pretty convincing, but the viewer will never know what these backgrounds really are. Without Nino's props, all we had to work with for these interviews were black drapes or ugly wallpaper, and a very unhappy producer on our hands. Let's see how we can make all this work together. We already lit the subject in the previous segment. Now it's time to create what goes behind the subject, and that's the background. Let's create a background where there's none. The first thing to do is to bring in one of the collapsible backdrops to hide the ugly wall. As you can see, Nino uses the composition rule of third, but instead of placing the subject in place, he placed the background to create the composition, kind of doing it backward. He then starts lighting the background. Remember the chiaroscuro segment we saw earlier? Same lighting techniques. Using a Fresnel light, he lights only behind the subject's head, concentrating the light on the shadow side of the face. The same thing we've seen in the chiaroscuro section. This probably would be good enough for many interviews, but the producer wants more. Next, he brings in an atrium table. This is also one of the many of Nino's old props. The legs come off, and it packs nice and compact. He lights the table with a small Fresnel LED light and with a 1/2 CTO gel to the light in order to bring up the warm color of the woodwork on the table. Next, he'll put some tchotchkes on the table and decorates the wall with a picture. Of course, he cannot put holes in the wall, so he'll hang the picture from a boom stand with spring clamps. Now that everything is in place, it's time to start lighting all the stuff on the table. Remember that for the most, Nino uses Fresnel lights on the background, and the reason is that they are more controllable. He can direct the light just where it's needed. The picture gets lit first. Apparently, the light on this side won't work. It casts a shadow inside the image. But by moving the light on the opposite side, the shadow will fall off the image. Next is the table with all the tchotchkes. As you can see, Nino placed the table about 2 feet from the background, and the reason for this is so he can backlight the table with all the stuff on it. Backlighting gives all the objects better separation and depth. As we can plainly see, the difference if lit from the front. From the camera view, you can't tell that the table is set away from the wall. And here's the difference on how backlighting an object or subject will add to dimensional depth. One of the reasons that we use shining objects on the background is that producers today love to have those bokeh shining in the background. If the producer prefers a totally out-of-focus background with plenty of bokeh, we can accomplish this by simply adjusting the camera exposure so we can use the lens maximum aperture. And now we're done with a single subject, single camera interview. Now, to make things even more challenging, the producer wants this to be a two-camera interview, meaning that we have to build an entirely new set just across from the set we just built for a single camera interview. The layout of the second set is basically a mirror image of the first one. So basically, what we have are two separate single camera interviews in front of each other. Let's start first by placing the second subject in front of the first subject, like two people just having a friendly conversation. Next step is the second subject lighting process. As a key light, we'll use a second chimera light, so now we have two 45-degree lights, one on each subject. Next is the second hair light, followed by the side or kick light. Please notice that we didn't mention fill light. Look at the first subject as Nino adjusts the side light. Only the edge of the side light will hit the hair of the second subject, while most of the light will fill the face of the first subject. What we're doing here is eliminating one, actually two, fill lights. The side light of each subject is now also the fill light for the subject across. Now let's start working on the second background. Nino brings in one of the room dividers from his collection of props and the collapsible bookcase. He lights the background using two Fresnel lights, also with 1/2 CTO gel for the wooden room divider to bring out the warmth of the wood. Many of the most current Fresnel LED lights can be adjusted to either tungsten or daylight colors, thus eliminating the need of using CTO gels. Also notice that Nino lights the background from the top using booms. The reason for this is to eliminate potential hotspots, reflecting off the background into the camera. If lit from above, then the angle of reflection will be only visible if you lay on the floor and will not interfere with the image. And now we have two sets for a two-camera interview. For those not familiar with the most standard setup of two-camera interviews, the person to be interviewed is usually isolated in his own shot, while the reporter conducting the interview is usually framed with the interviewee in the foreground. Like all this wasn't enough, the producer now asked if we could add a third side view camera. Nino has done it many times before, but the producer forgot that we have all our equipment in the same room, and behind our equipment is a very ugly and bare wall. But nevertheless, he's the boss, and he hired Nino because he can't say the word no. The first thing we have to do is build and put in place a black wall, or a large black cloth. If we had the room to throw the third background out of focus, we could use a different fabric in Nino's arsenal that would look more like a wall. But we only have a few feet to work with, so black will be the only solution. After the third background is in place, it's time to move our key light. The rest of the lights will remain as they were on the previous setups. But as far as the key light goes, it must be moved. If not, the lights and stands will be smack in the middle of the third background. One of the solutions is to build a frame with speed rails so the key light and the support will be high and outside camera view. Now it's time to start decorating the wall, or in our case, the black cloth. Let's start by putting up some pictures. We can't put nails on the cloth, so the only way to hang them is by using picture wire, also known as fishing line, and clamp the lines onto the tubing frame with spring clamps. Next, we'll place another black cloth on the floor, as inevitably the floor will show, and we really don't want this floor to show, and this floor is video unfriendly. As a final touch, we'll add a table with some tchotchkes on it and a small plant that we borrowed from the building. And here they are. 1 camera, 2 cameras, and 3 cameras, and the whole thing. As you can see, with a little ingenuity and a few props, we can create visual miracles. But most important, we have a very grateful producer who will not forget us. Think about this. The total cost of all these props is the equivalent of 1 single crew's day rate. With the potential of generating many and many more assignments, it's a well worth investment. If you're really in a hurry, you can light a 2-camera interview with only 2 lights on the subjects, plus more for the backgrounds, depending on how involved and how much time they give you to set everything up. Here we have 2 Astra light panels with their softboxes mounted on 2 booms above and behind the subjects. These are the key lights, but being dead center, they don't need a fill light. The light is tilted so the edge of the light will act as a hair light first and as a key light on the subject sitting in the opposite direction. Now, let's go on the road with Nino and see how he handled a variety of background situations. Let's start with the Gruden's QB camp. Nino and his son Joe started with the show in 2009. This was the very first set, a very video-unfriendly old office space that Nino and Joe had to transform into a makeshift studio. On show day, they had a crew of 4. The show became a success. After 4 years, it was moved to the ESPN Wide World of Sports facility in Disney World, and that crew of 4 is now a crew of 50. Interviews are a critical part of the show, and Nino has a separate room just for interviews. For this set, Nino uses ICANN Piatto LED lights. These are not very well-known lights, but very handy for specific situations. The ICANN lights are very thin, dimmable daylight balanced lights that fit everywhere. For this particular background, Nino uses 8 of these lights mounted in between the lockers, so most of the lighting comes from within rather than from the outside. This set was created so we could have 3 different camera angles, straight on, left, and right. Our next background is for one of our regular shoots we do during the college football season. For this set, we want the background to tell a story, but not overpowering the subject. We have 1 Fresnel on the background. We borrow an old trophy as a prop and light it with 2 Fresnels, one from the side and one from the back. We really don't need to see the actual trophy, but we're looking to create those glaring circles called bokeh that clients love so much these days. Once the background is done, we fine-tune the lights and we're ready to go. The next setup was a little more challenging. Fortunately, we had a full day to build the set. This is the annual Under Armour All-American Football event, where the top high school seniors in the country gather for a week of top football activities before they head to their selected universities to play college football. For subject lights, we use 2 of Nino's diffusers as key and fill and 2 large LEDs as their side lights. But the challenges here weren't the subject's lights. The producers wanted this look created with heavy-duty construction metal screens. In front of a black background, we had to build a frame with speed rails, then clamp the heavy screen to the frame. Because the screen would simply disappear into the black background, we had to use 6 Fresnel lights from all sides to create reflections from the screens so it can be seen by the camera. Everything worked out well, and we had a very happy and loyal producer to work with for the next few days. This is the same Under Armour event in the previous year. This time, the producer asked for a very simple large background. They also needed extreme close-ups as well as wide shots. The standard zoom lenses on large format video cameras just don't have that long range. So to expedite the process, Nino mounted the camera on a dolly and track tubings so it could be moved closer or further from the subject. The next assignment wasn't exactly an interview, but the setup and lighting was the same as we would do for a dramatic-looking interview. The only challenge here was that we had to do this in conjunction with a large green screen shoot and get those football players in and out ASAP. We placed the camera, so all we had to do was pan it 90 degrees from one set to the other with no time wasted. The background was total black. We used a chimera on a Fresnel with fabric grid and flexible barn doors as a key set at 90 degrees. A 4x4 white reflector was placed on the opposite side of the key, not as a fill, but just to give us some details in the shadow areas. To make the shot more dramatic, we mounted an LED Fresnel high on a boom for a side backlight. The next set of interviews is for the WWE about wrestling legends. Starting with Bruno Sammartino, here you can see the wide use of Nino's collection of backgrounds. Lighting were all Kineflow fluorescent with many Fresnels for the backgrounds. With Bruno, of course, we didn't use any hair light, but only a side light on the back. Next, we had Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, and we had to show his diamond-studded belt. For this, we used two of Nino's backgrounds. You can see how realistic the backgrounds are in the image. The next interview was in front of a black background. We used a 1000 watts RE light converted to LED with a yellow gel to give a light behind the subject. For the next interview, we used an ETC Source 4 to project a pattern on the background. We stacked some drinking glasses so we can have those nice bokeh reflections. Also notice how the harsh pattern projected on the background by the ETC Source 4 light, how nice and soft and pleasant the pattern becomes when using a larger f-stop and a longer lens. Next, we have a very unusual interview, or more like someone reading from a teleprompter. Here we have a black background with colors and patterns thrown by several LED Fresnel lights. We also have a Fresnel as a side light to intentionally give a harsh edge light. Subject lights are a Kineflow 4-footer as a key, a barfly as a fill, and an Astra light panel with a softbox as a hair light. We also had two Fresnels with diffusion for the hat rack. Our next interview is a very unusual situation. We're in a sunken lobby. Normally, with so many windows around us, we would work to use as much natural light as we can. But in this case, the natural light was 6 feet above the floor and doing absolutely nothing to our subject but throwing a lot of unneeded natural light on the background. First thing we had to do is to soften and reduce the natural window light that was hitting the background. We accomplished this by placing a large collapsible diffuser against the main window. But it was still too much light for the subject, so we blocked the incoming light with a collapsible black screen. For the key, we used a 400-watt HMI light through a large collapsible 2-stops diffuser. For hair and side light, we had two bare 1x1 foot light panels. We completed the setup by projecting a Fresnel on the background to create a halo on the subject. Next is an interview with former University of Florida basketball coach Billy Donovan. For the subject light, we used the standard 4 lights Kineflow fluorescent. We also used 4 Fresnels for the background. One Fresnel on the Gator sign, the other to create a lighter spot behind the coach's head, and 2 Fresnels on the basketball rack. The rack was placed at about 10 feet from the back wall. One light was set high above and behind, and one on the side to give the ball a nice roundness and depth from the background. This is an interview with college coach legend Lou Holtz. Always an education just listening to this man. This interview was about golf. Rather a simple but effective setup. We placed 2 pictures in the background, one on a chair and another on the floor sitting on a case. We used one of Nino's diffusers as a key light and a light panel softbox for fill. A small LED I-can Piatto was used for hair light and no side light, as Coach Holt's light color hair was enough to give us separation. We placed a black collapsible screen against the wall for reducing light bouncing off the white wall, otherwise known as negative fill. Also notice this was a conference room with a large unmovable table smack in the center. The stand for the key light is actually on the table. We placed a black cloth under the stand in order not to damage the table surface. This is a 3-camera interview with an attorney for a sports feature. The DSLR third camera was provided by the producer. Both main cameras were shooting from the adjacent rooms to gain depth. Also notice the black gaffer tape on the bookcase. The white wood was very distracting and overpowering. The last of the backgrounds is what Nino refers to as lazy man background. This is a simple green chroma key. Nino has a large stock of background images that he's been accumulating for years. Every time he creates a background that he likes, he rolls a few minutes of video and keeps it in his files for when it will come in handy. This has saved the day many and many times. This concludes the background segment of this program. On the next segment, Nino will demonstrate in detail the grips and rigging that you've seen throughout this program, as well as other larger location setups. In order to achieve an outstanding image for the viewers to see, there's a lot of work to be done behind the scenes. The ability of creating something that isn't there is the skill that has kept Nino busy for over half a century and earned him the nickname of the problem solver. It's not really that hard to do. All it requires is a little imagination, being handy with tools, and lots of grips. These are the unseen skills that lead to a successful career. None of the grips we'll be seeing in this segment are very expensive to purchase, or at least not as expensive as cameras and lenses, and most likely are already in your grip kit. But knowing how to use grips and build things to help the assignment is what keeps those expensive cameras and lenses busy working. Keep in mind that we're not trying to compete with grip trucks, but usually the rigging we do is not big enough to justify the expense of hiring a grip company. This is when we, as cameramen, have to fill the gap. The better we can do it, the better the chances are that the producer will call us back for the next assignment. The basic rule, as far as buying grips goes, any time on a job you wish you had something, it should be in your grip kit before the next assignment comes along. Let's see the variety of grips that Nino uses and what he can do with them. We will not talk about the basic stuff like gaffer tape or black foil. Surely you already have all this in your grip kit. Instead, we'll concentrate on the grips that we've seen Nino using throughout this program. Let's start with the small or unusual stuff that can really save the day and impress the producer. A picture hanging kit should be inside everyone's grip kit, especially picture hanging wires. A small assortment of pins doesn't take much room but can save a lot of time. Safety cables. We can't stress this enough, especially if you have to hang anything above a person's head. Gravity can really cause troubles and pain. Flexible arms. You never know how useful it can be until you need one of these. A small flexible arm that can hold a piece of black foam cord to shield light where it's not needed or wanted, especially in front of the camera lens. Standard and affordable wooden clothespins. Use them to attach gels or black foil to lights, as well as hundreds more uses. Now, let's move on to the bigger stuff. You should have a good supply and selection of light stands on hand, from the very small to the heavy-duty ones. There's a good reason why there are so many types of light stands available. They all serve a purpose. There's no such thing as one stand does it all. Having access to a selection of stands is not only a matter of convenience, but is also about safety. Get more out of your C-stands by converting them into smaller stands when needed. You can use a junior to baby pin adapter to mount any light just above the floor when needed. Or use extensions to convert the C-stand base to any size stand. You'll be surprised how often you'll be using these adapters. Of course, each light stand should have a sandbag to go with it. Please don't take shortcuts. A top-heavy light stand will inevitably fall over, and the least of the damage will be a broken light. The worst is someone really getting hurt. Safety should always be our top priority. The most popular grips found in grip kits are the grip heads and grip or gobo arm. There are two grip head sizes, the standard 2.5 inches, and for heavier duties, the larger 4.5 inches. The smaller version is the most popular, and it's also available in a variety of versions for different purposes. Usually, you see this used together with a grip arm for mounting flags or screens, or as a boom for smaller lights. Grip arms are available in two sizes, the popular 40-inch and the less known but very useful 20-inch. Next is the Matthews Mathellini clamp. Available in different sizes, this is a must in every grip kit. Just like you've seen in previous segments of this program, it allows lights and other grips to be mounted on just about everything. Mayfer or super clamps. This is another very useful and versatile clamp, a must for every grip kit. It can be mounted on a stand to support just about everything or used with any 5/8 pins to mount a light or anything else. Swivel pins are another useful grip to have in your grip kit. There are many uses for this, but the most beneficial is when you have to tilt a light beyond the standard tilt of a light fixture. Spring clamps. Available in all shapes and sizes for every imaginable purpose, there are no words to describe the benefits of a spring clamp. There are literally dozens of uses of this very basic piece of hardware. Spring clamps are available in many sizes and shapes for just about every need. There are never enough spring clamps. This is why Nino has a very ample supply of every kind of spring clamp there is. Ceiling clamps. If you've been in business long enough, guaranteed that you have a set of ceiling clamps in your grip kit. If you don't, then get some. There are many times when an interview or any other assignment would benefit by not having stands clutter the floor. Often the quality of an image is limited or compromised because light stands are in the way. Mounting a light on the track of a drop ceiling is often the best and only solution for good lighting. The next one is one of Nino's best and most useful of all grips, also the most profitable. He started with 2 pieces of aluminum tubing to hold a background a few decades ago. Now, Nino has an extensive selection of tubing and accessories, also known as speed rail. From building setups like large chroma key assignments to building the interior of this work van, Nino has found dozens of beneficial uses for aluminum tubing. The ability of creating things that can improve many assignments has been one of the reasons that have kept Nino busy for decades. There are all kinds of connectors to build just about everything that's needed. From larger projects to simple uses, producers have come to depend on Nino to get things done no matter what. This was a weekly show with college football coach Urban Meyer that ran for several months on ESPN Game Day Show. This was Coach Meyer's family room at his house before the show. And this was after Nino and his son Joe went to work. It was converted into a TV studio, all made possible by aluminum tubing. The set remained in place for several months, and once a week, Nino and his crew traveled to the coach's house to record the show. These are great gigs. Another occasion where aluminum tubing literally saved the day. Nino's assignment was to have a black background interview with former Buccaneer head coach John Gruden. The problem was that there were no rooms available in the entire building. So Nino took all the tubings and black cloth he had in his van, and outside the building, he put together a totally dark 9-foot by 9-foot, 16-foot long room. Needless to say, that producer and client were ecstatic. Almost 15 years later, Nino is still working with Coach Gruden, this time in his new office. At least once or twice a year, Nino has to convert Gruden's office into a full TV studio. And once again, aluminum tubing is what makes this conversion a much easier task. Nino uses 7 Kinoflow fluorescent lights, plus several Fresnels on this set. These lights are too heavy to be used with ceiling clamps, so Nino used 1-inch tubings to build several of these H-mounts and inserts them above the ceiling, giving the lights a better and safer support. Also, you can see spring clamps all over the ceiling to keep wiring and safety cable neat and safe. This is another of Nino's very useful ideas to improve the job and save a lot of time. We all have spring clamps that have lost their plastic tips and are no longer useful. So instead of discarding them, Nino bent the tips to a 90-degree angle. Now they're converted into an easy-to-slip support on the ceiling track to hold wires and safety cables. This was a 5-camera shoot, and Nino had to find a way to hide 2 of the cameras so they couldn't be seen by the other 3 cameras. Nino rearranged the bookcases to form 2 L-shaped corners on the left and on the right of the large monitor. He connected the bookcases with corner shelves purchased from Amazon, then cut a hole on each corner and hid a camera and operator behind the bookcases. If you look carefully, you can see the lenses. Let's now go back to the interview room of the Gruden's QB camp that we've seen in a previous segment. You've probably seen these lights mounted on top of these lockers. This room is actually a large trailer, so the ceiling is not very high, and there's not much room to place stands on the floor. Also, it doesn't have a drop ceiling to mount lights. The only solution was to mount the lights above the lockers. But this required a little outside-the-box thinking. With the aid of grips, all lights are mounted on pieces of plywood. To mount the light, Nino used wall mounting plates with baby pins on one side, and to counterbalance the plywood, he also mounted a second plate at the other end so he could place compact barbell weights instead of bulky sandbags. As Nino didn't have enough wall plates on hand, he created his own. He used easily available cheese plates. With a drill, he tapered one of the existing holes so the base can lay flat. He mounted a standard 5/8 pin using a 1/4 inch tapered screw and drilled the plates to the plywood. Not the most attractive solution, but it did the job and did it well. This concludes the art and skill of interviews. We thank you for participating, and we sincerely hope that the skills you've seen throughout this program will be beneficial to your career. Thank you.
Are we ready, Nino? Okay.
All right, Nino, don't screw this up, man.
Nino? That's your boy right there.
Yeah.
Looking out for you.
He's
Good,
the
good?
best.
All set, ready to go.
Okay. All right, Coach, let's get right into it.